It looked like a normal snack, just another pot noodle in a prison officer's bag. But when staff at HMP Lindholme took a closer look, something didn't sit right. The noodles had been disturbed, the inside was tampered with. What they pulled out wasn't food, and it wasn't meant to be found. What started as a routine search turned into something else entirely. A thread that would take 6 years to unravel. Because what lay buried in that plastic pot was only the beginning. This is the story of a corrupt officer, a prison flooded with drugs, and how one pot noodle exposed them all. Though we touched on it in the intro, but what happened next deserves a closer look. Victoria Sked didn't look like someone running drugs. No record or a wrong reputation. Just a 26-year-old officer at HMP Lindholme nearing the end of her contract. She was days from walking out for good when officers stopped her at the gate and the bag was pulled aside for a routine check. Nothing unusual. What officers found inside changed everything. The pot noodle, chicken and mushroom, looked ordinary at first, but inside were 2 cling film wrapped parcels tucked under the noodles. The smell gave it away. Officers suspected cannabis, and it wasn't the only thing that raised the alarm. They took her aside for a full search. More items were found on her person, small, concealed, and clearly not for personal use. Psychoactive substances, a vial of steroids with a wrap of MDMA. Above all, a mobile phone, SIM card, and tobacco was also part of the seizure. It wasn't the kind of seizure they expected from someone in uniform. Sked didn't protest. She barely spoke. But the search had opened a door, one that couldn't be closed. For the team at the prison anti-corruption unit, this wasn't just about one officer smuggling in a few wraps. This was a sign of something deeper, and the next steps would prove it. After the search at HMP Lindholme, Victoria Sked was taken into custody. But it was the warrant that followed, and the search of her home, that confirmed the scale of what she was involved in. Inside her Doncaster property, officers uncovered more than just a few leftovers from a smuggling run. What they found was systematic. 17 mobile phones in which 5 were iPhones, 5 wraps of cannabis, nearly £8,000 in cash, and a pile of post, not letters, but 332 sheets of paper laced with spice. It wasn't random. It was planned and carefully packed. There were photos too, stored on her phone, not selfies, but close-ups of SIM cards, chargers, and kinder egg holders used to smuggle tech past security. Each image is documented, each item prepped for concealment. Police didn't find names at that time, but they found a method. Drugs, phones and cash, all flowing through a serving officer's hands and into the prison system she was meant to protect. There was no claim of coercion, no evidence of desperation, just a trail of illicit items and a lifestyle that didn't match her payslip. Sked wasn't alone, but at that moment, she was the only one exposed. The rest of the network, still hidden. At least for now. Victoria Sked had given them a foot in the door. The investigation was only just the beginning. South Yorkshire Police's Prison Anti-Corruption Unit began working through her financial records. Payments, transfers, names that didn't belong. And one name, Ayesha Martin, kept surfacing. She wasn't an officer, she didn't work at HMP Lindholme, but she was involved, and detectives could prove it. CCTV footage showed Martin turning up at Sked's home address with packages. Not once, but 7 times. Each time, she arrived with something in hand, but left empty every time. Police believed the packages contained phones, SIM cards, and drugs, prepared for delivery behind bars. Further evidence backed it up. Later, on Martin's own phone, they found photos. Cling film-wrapped bundles, SIM cards, items that matched the stash pulled from Sked's house. It wasn't random, and it wasn't casual. Martin was part of the supply chain. And the timing lined up with her partner, a man already serving time inside Lindholme. But at this point, the connection was still only partial. To understand the full scale, detectives had to go inside the prison walls. With the outside links confirmed, the next move was obvious. Investigators turned their focus inside HMP Lindholme, looking not just for evidence, but for people. The first breakthrough came during a routine cell search. Officers checked a DVD player on one of the spurs. Inside, hidden behind the disc tray, they found 4 mobile phones. Forensic analysis followed. One of the phones was linked to inmate Robert Williams. He wasn't just using it to make calls. The messages told their own story: codes, contacts, and drop details. Enough to tie him to the drug supply chain inside Lindholme. Conversations that matched dates and amounts moving in from the outside. This wasn't recreational use. It was coordination. And it wasn't just one device. More phones were traced, more messages decrypted, and a clear pattern began to form, showing who was taking orders, who was receiving deliveries, and where those deliveries were ending up. Sked's arrest had exposed the access. Martin's movements had shown the handoffs. And now, inside the prison, officers were beginning to piece together the full route, from living room to landing. It was no longer speculation. It was now evidence. Robert Williams wasn't the only inmate with a phone or a supply route. As officers pulled more threads, the same pattern kept surfacing. Inmates inside with the partners functioning outside, each pair playing their part. Gareth Roberts, already flagged during phone analysis, was linked to another suspect, Diane Monks. She wasn't found with texts or transfers. She was caught in person during a visit to HMP Lindholme in November 2018. Officers stopped her at the gate. She was carrying spice. Jack McGlenn, another inmate, ran his part of the operation with more precision. His partner, Ayesha Harrison, wasn't smuggling drugs herself, but she was managing the money. Phone and financial records showed transfers between Harrison and multiple Lindholme inmates regularly. Clean on paper, but traced back to the smuggling routes now being exposed. Inside the prison, McGlenn wasn't just receiving, he was supplying. The drugs that came in didn't stay long. They moved quickly, cell to cell, wing to wing. McGlenn's name came up again and again in messages, with requests, prices, and instructions. Each inmate had a role. Each partner backed them up from outside. The system wasn't noisy, it was structured. And now it was collapsing. Not everyone involved had someone inside. Some were simply in it for the money. Darren Morgan was one of them. He wasn't part of the prison system, no visits logged or known relatives inside. But when officers raided his home, they found spice, and more than that. Diamorphine, cocaine, and enough evidence to suggest intent to supply. His name came up in the financial trails, moving cash connected to smuggling runs. Then there was Adam Kirk. He wasn't linked through drugs at first. He was stopped while driving without a license, under the influence, and without insurance. But the timing and what he had in his system linked him back to the wider smuggling operation. Further investigation showed he'd played a part in smuggling cannabis into the supply line. Both men were outside the prison walls, but they weren't on the outside of the operation, and they weren't alone. Abigail Carter had no partner inside, but her sister did. She helped move money, handled communications, passed on instructions. It wasn't high-level coordination, but it kept the operation going. Each name added weight, and by the time police pieced them all together, the list was long. But there was still one thing left: sentencing. Once police had connected the dots, the investigation began to shift. It was no longer about suspicion. Now it was about taking people in. The prison anti-corruption unit moved methodically. Inside Lindholme, Prison cells were searched, phones were recovered, devices traced to inmates including Robert Williams, Gareth Roberts, Jack McGlenn, and Simon McGinley, each one linked by call logs, messages, or photos to supply operations behind bars. Sked had already been arrested during her shift. Her home was searched the same day, but outside the prison, further raids followed. In Wakefield, Ayesha Martin was arrested at her home on Baring Gould Way. Her partner McGinley was already serving time, now detained for questioning under new charges. In Leeds, Gareth Roberts was detained at Manor Farm Drive. Jack McGlenn was picked up from Woodbridge Lawn. Alicia Harrison, his partner, was arrested later at her address on Woodbridge Crescent. Further out, Darren Morgan was found in Bradford. His property on Renee Close was searched, revealing spice, heroin, cocaine, and items indicating supply. Adam Kirk arrest we already discussed. His arrest led to a property search and further evidence. Abigail Carter was located in Skelmersdale. Though not found with drugs herself, financial records tied her to the wider network, moving cash linked to her sister's prison contacts. Each arrest was deliberate, based on clear evidence. A mix of drug charges, money laundering, and possession of banned items followed, both under the Misuse of Drugs Act and the Prison Act. By the end of the operation, police had charged 12 people. The smuggling line had been severed from the inside out. On the 6th of December 2024, the case reached Sheffield Crown Court. 10 defendants stood in the dock, the product of a 6-year investigation by South Yorkshire Police's Prison Anti-Corruption Unit. The courtroom was quiet as the prosecution laid out what had been uncovered: a coordinated effort to smuggle drugs, mobile phones, and SIM cards into HMP Lindholme between August 2018 and July 2019, supported by money laundering, courier drop-offs, and communication from inside prison walls. The defense offered little resistance. With the weight of forensic evidence, financial records, and surveillance footage, most had already entered guilty pleas. A few tried to distance themselves, citing influence from others or claiming they didn't know the full scale of what they were part of. But the judge made clear, this wasn't a series of one-off mistakes. It was a system. Victoria Sked, 32, the prison officer who had first been caught with the cannabis-filled Pot Noodle, received a sentence of 3 years and 11 months. Along with the cannabis, steroids, MDMA, spice, and phones into the prison, and had been laundering the proceeds throughout her final months in uniform. Ayesha Martin, 30, was sentenced to 3.5 years for delivering packages to Sked's home and was also found guilty. Simmy McGinley, 30, Martin's partner, was sentenced to 1.5 years for drug smuggling, money laundering, and possession of a mobile phone while inside. Gareth Roberts, 38, another Lindholme inmate, was given 3.5 years after admitting to smuggling cannabis and spice. Robert Williams, 35, also serving inside, was jailed for 1 year and 10 months for involvement in mobile phone and drug supply. Jack McGlenn, 33, received 4 years. The court found he had been coordinating drug distribution from his cell. His partner, Alicia Harrison, 27, was sentenced to 21 months, suspended for 12 for handling financial transactions. Darren Morgan, 45, from Bradford, received the longest term among inmates to 4 years and 10 months. Adam Kirk, 34, from Leeds, was jailed for 2 years and 4 months after admitting to smuggling cannabis. He had also been convicted of dangerous driving, driving while disqualified, and driving under the influence. Abigail Carter, 24, was given a 16-month sentence, suspended for 12 months. 2 other names were not sentenced that day. Diane Monks, 46, who had been caught smuggling spice during a visit to Lindholme, had her case adjourned. Lydia Ratcliffe, 30, had already received a 12-month conditional discharge in July 2024 after admitting to contacting inmates on banned mobile phones. She was found not guilty of laundering funds. In total, the courtroom handed down more than 25 years of combined prison time and closed one of the most structured smuggling cases South Yorkshire Police had ever investigated. What do you make of this case? Should the sentences have been longer, or were they fair given the circumstances? Let us know what you think in the comments. And if you want more true stories from inside the UK justice system, subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with us. There's always another case to uncover.